The best piece of advice we got from our surveyor this summer was to buy this. You're going to look at a lot of boats. If you're looking for a used boat, you got to go through a ton of them. And we might do a little video based on our experiences this summer of all the boats that we looked at. We looked at roughly 6 or 8 different boats before we stumbled upon the one that we finally bought. In fact, it was the last one, and we kind of left it at the end because it was the most expensive. But it ended up being similar price to what we wanted to pay anyway. So anyway, to the point, you're going to look at a lot of boats, and most of them, if you're in the boat price range that we were at, you're going to have to just discard because they're wet. I think 6 out of 8 of the boats or so that we looked at were soaking wet, and some of them look pretty good. In fact, one of the tartans we looked at had a beautiful gel coat on the outside. You know, you could see a reflection in the green gel coat. Step inside, and it had been leaking through the top like crazy. All the woodwork was rotten. So a real quick way that you can eliminate boats is by picking yourself up a moisture meter. So, you know, I had started my conversation, and we'll do another video on surveying and surveyors and how valuable they are at another time. But you know, his advice was get one of these. It's $50, and you can pick it up at Amazon. You can pick them up from Lowe's Depot. You know, they're easy to find. His recommendation was that you want this type that has no metal prongs. This comes in 2 styles. It comes with a flat end that you can touch on, which is nice because you can get it into narrower spaces than you can with this one. And that's the one that my surveyor carries as his backup. Now, his comment was he's got the $300 or $400 professional moisture meter for surveying yachts, and that's what he uses normally. But in his bag, because like any professional, you bring a backup tool, he carries one of these. His was the same brand. It just had the pivoted head so that he could get between narrow spots. And he said he's tested it over the years. Anytime his professional meter rings, so did this one. So he said for the purposes of a you know, a homeowner or layperson, if you will, shopping for a boat, you want to just grab one of these. I mean, it's so cheap, and it allowed us to eliminate so many boats right off the bat. I know there's a huge controversy over moisture meters, and most of the negative comments that I heard about it were from the selling agents, of course, right? They're trying to discredit anything that makes the boat sound bad. And there are definitely shortcomings of a moisture meter like this one. Number one is that you can get false readings. And the other thing that people will say, well, just because a boat's wet doesn't mean it's bad. And I take argument with that. For me, you know, we didn't want to have to spend a whole ton of time doing major surgery on a boat. Yeah, if it's a little bit wet, but everything's still hard and not delaminating, it's still structurally okay for the time being, but it's only a matter of time before that starts to rot in there and becomes a problem. It's just when are you going to fix it versus if you're going to fix it. So we wanted to buy a boat that was dry, at least mostly dry, and that's what we ended up with. We ended up with a boat that, and we'll show you some of the footage here, as we went around the surface of the top sides, at least compared to all the other boats that we looked at, this one was like 95% dry. There was a few spots around the foot of the mast, showed a little bit of moisture, and there was a couple of spots around some of the eye-rings for, I think the bimini had a little bit of a high reading, but it was inches rather than feet of bad spots. So we were able to find something. But there were plenty of boats that we looked at. In fact, most of them, I dropped this on the deck and ran it up the sides, and it just didn't stop ringing. All the side decks were completely soaking wet, and then you go down below and you can see the evidence. You know, and you start to see it, the clues after a while if you look too many boats. You go underneath and you can see where it's coming through the chain plates, or you know, the bulkheads. If they're wooden, they're all stained at the top, and you get stain marks coming down the corners. So beyond those visuals, some of the boats actually looked okay inside, but you could still ring them out with your moisture meter. So I was just going to give you a quick little demonstration how this works, and I'll give you the lowdown as my surveyor gave it to me. So these have multiple settings on them. You want to go for the most sensitive one. If you don't know which one that is, you can pick a spot and something like this panel, this is the anchor locker from the yacht we bought this summer. This definitely has a piece of wet plywood in the middle of it, and that's why it's here during the wintertime. I'm going to redo it. But you can take a spot that you know is wet, and you can cycle through the modes until you find the mode that gives you the lowest number. And he said that that's where you want it. So this one, it's hardwood. He said, don't pay so much attention to the actual number. You can use it as a reference. If you're, say you're out on a damp day, you know, some of this non-skids could have a little bit of water in it, and the moisture meter might pick that up. If it's really wet, it's absolutely going to pick it up. But if it's just damp, you know, like morning dew, you can say, okay, 10% here must be dry. Slide over to here and I get 25%. We know that's wet. The 10% is maybe not wet. The specific number wasn't so much important because when the alarm goes off, when it starts beeping, you know it's definitely wet or something else. The other thing that can throw off a meter like this is it doesn't actually read moisture. It reads conductivity. So if there's something in play that is conductive, it's going to pick that up too. So to demonstrate, I grabbed this piece of steel. This is a body working dolly. You can see it picks that up. So when you're reading panels, it doesn't always pick up stainless. Like I don't think it'll pick this up, no. So non-conductive or non-magnetic stainless grades, and some are and some aren't, don't set off the alarm. But the ones that do, that are magnetic are gonna set this thing off. So if you're scanning a deck, you got to be aware of what's underneath it. Maybe there's a chain plate that's going to set it off, and just be aware. Keep that in the back of your head. You know, backing plates for, who knows, Genoa tracks. Those might set the alarm off. Wires. You could have a bundle of wires going by underneath the deck. So just be cognizant of what's underneath that might be giving you a false positive, and to be okay. So here's an example. We'll do our anchor locker cover. There is plywood reinforcement on the back here, and it's all cracked and damaged, probably because of these holes. For some reason, somebody drilled something through here. Classic. Drilled some holes through without sealing the holes. Really, when you go through a wooden core, you should drill it out extra big, fill it with epoxy, then re-drill it at a smaller diameter so that you have no exposed edges on the wood. And of course, butyl or whatever your favorite topside sealant is over the hole when you put a fastener through it. So it looks like there's 3 holes here. Anyway, we can see, put the meter up here, and we're reading, you know, 8 or 9, but then move over into the wood area and we get 20%. It starts beeping. So fairly reasonable. Like I said, we can trick it. So we can see if I put the piece of steel behind here, it goes off. And if I take the steel away, it goes back to being dry, supposedly. All right. The other thing that can play games with the meter is bottom paint. Anti-fouling paints, especially the black ones, they say. And I happen to have the rudder from our yacht here, which also needs some work from delamination. We can see that sends off the alarm, and there's no way to get around that on a piece like the rudder where there's no backside. But if it's the bare hull and you're concerned about it, maybe, you know, some of the boats in certain age groups have balsa cord hulls. C&Cs, a lot of those have them. You'd have to be worried about the core in the hull being wet. So my surveyor's advice was go inside the boat. If there's black or bottom paint that's fouling your reading on the outside, if you can, go to the inside of that spot and measure it from the other side. You should be able to get a reasonably good measurement doing it that way. And just to make sure that you're not getting an anti-fouling issue, let me readjust the camera so you can see. So here's the surface of our rudder. We've got anti-fouling paint here. Obviously there's no anti-fouling paint on the foam. Thinks it's wet, thinks it's not wet. So it's clearly the anti-fouling paint that's causing the problem. So go get one of these. I mean, there's no reason not to. 50 bucks. If you're going to spend, you know, 10, 20, $30,000 plus on a yacht, why wouldn't you spend 50 bucks for a moisture meter?